Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om, peace, peace, peace. And good evening, and this is Swami Brahmananda's Puja Day. So before we continue with the readings from Swami Ramakrishnananda, I thought I'd read at least a short passage from the Eternal Companion, which is a compendium of the teachings of Swami Brahmananda. And of course, the founder of this center, Swami Prabhupada, was a disciple of Swami Brahmananda, so this center has always had a special place in its heart for Swami Brahmananda. A disciple asked him, Maharaj, what is the significance of all these gods and goddesses? Do they really exist? And what is the meaning and purpose of ritualistic worship? And Maharaj answers, the many gods and goddesses represent but so many different aspects of the one Godhead. Men differ in their temperaments and so are inclined to different ways of worship. To meet the needs of all, the scriptures prescribe four distinct methods of worship. One method is the ritualistic worship of God embodied in an image or symbol. Higher than this is the worship of God with prayer and japam. But this means the aspirant prays and chants and meditates upon the shining form of the chosen ideal within his own heart. Higher still is meditation. When a man practices this form of worship, he keeps up a constant flow of thought toward God and becomes absorbed in the living presence of his chosen ideal. He goes beyond prayer and japam, but the sense of duality remains. The highest method of worship is meditation on the unity of the Atman and Brahman. This leads directly and immediately to God. The aspirant experiences Brahman. He knows that God is. It is an actual realization of the omnipresent reality. All right, so that's our passage from the Eternal Companion, and it kind of dovetails with our next topic in Ramakrishnananda's works. It's entitled God and the World. No man who has not true love toward God can be religious. Religion begins when attraction toward God is greater than attraction towards the world. Our master, Sri Ramakrishna, used to say that there are two lodestones in the body, one below and the other above. Lodestones are like natural magnets. If the lower lodestone is the stronger, the mind will be drawn downward. If the upper lodestone is the stronger, then it will be attracted upward. In most people, the lower lodestone is all clear and able to attract the mind, while the upper one is so covered with dirt and dust of tamas, ignorance and impurity, that it cannot exercise the least power of attraction. So remove the dirt and dust, and at once the mind will be drawn to God. In all men of the world, the attraction is downward towards sense pleasures and worldliness. If this lower lodestone ceases to attract, it is because some stronger attraction is being exerted, and that attraction is God. The attraction upwards towards God is called religion. The downward attraction towards the world is irreligion. Therefore, no man can begin to be religious who has not a strong love towards God. And so this, of course, is a nice analogy. And our spiritual practices, of course, are designed to remove all that dirt and dust and ignorance and sloth and impurity, so that the magnet can be more drawn towards the spiritual. And if you could also think of it as an electromagnet. And if you spin the workings of an electromagnet, you can make it stronger and stronger, and you can increase the attraction of the magnet. So our spiritual disciplines are like running the dynamo of the electromagnet so that it can be attracted upwards. You cannot mix these two attractions, however, as light cannot be mixed with darkness. So God cannot be mixed with mammon. The attraction towards the world means egotism. Attraction toward God means self-surrender. The very existence of egotism shows that man is a bond-slave to the world. For what is the world? It is sense pleasure. It is money. It is name and fame. We see sometimes that some things that attract us, and we say, I must have that. It must be mine. But there are perhaps 100 others who also want the same thing. So then we begin to fight for it. Thus, competition and struggle come. Out of this struggle rises the idea of my right, my property, my advantage. Hence, an ever-growing consciousness of ego. But this is an active, aggressive condition, while the first condition of being attracted is to have a sense of complete surrender. The iron is wholly passive when it is drawn to the magnet. So long, therefore, as a man is struggling for his rights and he believes he is the actor, he cannot feel the attraction of God. Only when he becomes perfectly surrendered does he begin to be drawn upward. When he says with full conviction, I can do nothing of myself. Lord, do thou act. Then the upper lodestone begins to exercise its power. So yes, Sri Ramakrishna used to always say that if you can at any one time feel that you are not the doer, then you will be able to realize God. It's this rascal ego that he would say, that is the barrier between us and realizing God. So it's that complete feeling of self-surrender when you feel like you really can't do anything. You have to exhaust yourself to the point where you realize you can't do anything on your own. And then God will come and pick you up. Or as he says, the mother cat picks up her little baby kittens by the nape of the neck and carries them wherever they need to be. And so we have to have that sense of helplessness in some sense. And so a lot of our spiritual practices, especially karma yoga, are designed to reduce that sense of ego. If you work for the good of others rather than your own good, that lessens your ego, unless you begin to become proud of how much you're doing for others. That's a problem. So you have to be careful. All these yogas can have a trick to them where you have to be a little careful. Similarly with bhakti yoga, you try to turn everything over to God. Everything you've done, you turn over to God. All the results you turn over to God. But then, of course, the danger is if you think your form of the deity is better than anybody else's, and how dare these people worship this other image or aspect of God, and I've got to change them. They're all messed up. So you see, that's the danger in bhakti yoga. And then jnana yoga takes that direct approach of meditating on the union of Atman and Brahman. And there again, you have to be careful that the ego doesn't get in there. It's the ripe ego that has to say that I am one with Brahman, not the unripe ego. So that's that can be a danger there. And then Raja Yoga and Hatha Yoga and all those kinds of things that people can become with too much Hatha Yoga. They can become too much body consciousness. If pranayama, you can easily overdo it and get yourself into mental difficulties. Or if you overdo meditation before all of your prerequisites of the yamas and niyamas are fully established, you can also become a bit unbalanced. So all of these yogas have some difficulties that you have to overcome. And so, of course, most of us have to try to practice a blend of these different yogas because it's very difficult to reach the goal with just one, and we have many aspects to our lives. We want some time to sit quietly and meditate and establish a certain sense of peace to our mind, but you can't do that 18 hours a day. So you have to cook and clean and work and so forth, and so you have to practice some sort of karma yoga, which you can then combine with your bhakti yoga. And then you can do some reading and studying. So all of these things help to keep a balanced life through the day. Then he goes on and he says, as long as we keep asking, Lord, shall I do this or that? Shall I go here or there? We may be sure that we cannot know the divine will, because this means that our egotism is in full play. If, however, we can let go completely and say, Lord, do whatever thou wilt. I belong to thee. Guide me wholly according to thy wisdom. Then at once God will show us the way. Whenever we pray to God in right earnestness, he is sure to come to us. The trouble is, we pray to so many others besides God. We pray to the doctor to give us health, and to the shopkeepers to give us food or dress, and in among the rest, we pray to God to give us spiritual light and knowledge. When we look to him alone and pray to him and to no one else, he never fails to answer our prayers if we make them really intense. Actually, very few of us believe in God all the time. How do we know this? Because we allow anxieties and fears to arise in our minds. If we really have faith in God and in his infinite power and goodness, we can never feel fearful about anything. And of course, the Jnana Yogi would also have this great advantage. If you know that your true nature is free by its very nature, then all fear leaves you. And then if you're taking the devotional approach, if you sincerely believe that God is your pole star guiding every move in your life, then whatever happens by his will, and you accept all of it. If we really have faith in God and his infinite power and goodness, we can never feel fearful about anything. God is the only one who can free us from disease and fears. Hence, he is called the purifier. What makes the mind impure? Desire. Free the mind of all desires, and at once it becomes pure. A man, however, who has no idea of God can never get rid of desires. He will rather say, desire is the only thing that makes life pleasant. If I have no desires, what difference will there be between me and the wall? It is desire alone that gives me enjoyment. If I had no hunger, I could not enjoy good dishes. If I had no thirst, I could not enjoy a refreshing drink. For every desire in me, I find a satisfaction in the world. I have hunger, there is food. I have thirst, there is water. So it is through desire that I enjoy the world. Believing this, he will never be willing to give up desire. And of course, the problem with those things is that they tend to increase. And once you've fulfilled a few of them, then it seems like, well, so is that all? Isn't there something more? It didn't seem as satisfying as you thought it would be. That's usually the problem. Once we finally get what we desire, it's like, oh, well, that wasn't all that interesting. There must be something better. And so we go after some more material things, which also have the same problem. And so this is the difficulty. And you can't eat to your heart's content 24 hours a day. You can't drink to your heart's content 24 hours a day. You can't do any of these so-called pleasurable things 24 hours a day. And so there's no real satisfying these desires. The lover of God, on the other hand, sees that instead of bringing enjoyment, these desires are the source of all his miseries. He understands that in God alone can he find the satisfaction of all desire. For he is infinite bliss, and all other pleasures are finite and perishable. Anandam, or bliss, is the best definition of God. And if God is bliss, then no man is an atheist, because everyone is seeking a happiness which has no break, and that happiness is God. The real ideal of every human being is Satchidanandam, eternal life, infinite knowledge, and everlasting joy. For all men wish to live forever, to be all-knowing, and to have eternal bliss. But God alone is all life, all knowledge, and all happiness. Therefore, God is really the ideal of every living being. Sometimes I wonder, do people really want to live forever? I think it would be awfully boring. We're lucky that we've forgotten all of our past lives, or we'd probably be bored by now. We somehow we have this fear of death because that's just the ego programming, you see. The ego makes you think that you're a body and the mind, and those things apparently perish at the moment of death, but the spirit is everlasting. That's immortal. And so it's that identity with the true spirit. And there's some aspect of the consciousness that the mind is an organ of that also perceives after death. We have enough evidence from people who remember past lives or people that have near-death experiences and that sort of thing to know that some form of consciousness is independent of the body and the mind. And so you need not have any fear. The people that have these near-death experiences almost uniformly claim that they no longer have any fear of death, that it has no fear for them because they've seen a glimpse of that which is beyond and know that that their true essence is immortal. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, "First, let a man know his infinite nature, then let him play with the finite. First, seek God, then the world. Or as Christ taught, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven. Let God shine alone in his glory. Now we let the ego shine above him, and we throw God into the background. We make him the last consideration. We seek matter first and spirit afterwards. We should reverse the process. Our hearts also must be free from any ulterior motive. If we love God for what we can get from him in the world, we really love the world, not God. And we can never be true devotees. The true devotee loves God just for the joy of loving him, because God is beloved." So that ends that section on God and the world. And that's really one of the pillars of religion. If you study world religions and you try to get a sense of what is it that all religions are trying to get at? It's that this mystery of the relationship between yourself and the world, and what power there is behind that we're not perceiving, because it seems as though there must be some sort of guiding power, and usually called God or something of that nature, or the Great Spirit or something of that nature. And so how are they related? And of course, Vedanta says, well, they're really all one. Even this material world, which in many situations is described as separate, at a certain dualistic frame of mind, in the ultimate sense, it also is one with Brahman, because there isn't anything else. And so the difficulty is that if we try to start out at that point and see that the world is also God, that's not that easy. And we tend to get distracted by all these pleasurable things. However, it can be a path of where part of you can pursue that kind of idea, because we have to work with the world all the time. And so while you're having to deal with the world, do your best to see the divinity hiding within it. And just remember that the world is kind of God in disguise, you could say. And so don't fall in love with the disguise. Fall in love with the person that's in the disguise. It's sort of like going to a masquerade ball and being so enchanted by somebody's costume that you fall in love with them, and then they take it off and you find it's not the person you wanted at all. So this is a rather different situation. The world is very alluring, but the person behind it really is the one that you want, and is really causing the beauty of the world that attracts you. And so you have to remember that what is behind the world that's making you want things in it is really God, and you're better off going directly. Otherwise, it's kind of like pursuing it in a house of mirrors, where every turn you go, you can't really get at what it is you want. The pleasures of the world seem like they ought to be satisfying your desires, but ultimately they won't, because they're the disguise part, and you have to get beyond the disguise. All right, our next section is called True Worship of God. Self-existent bliss comes from God alone. The little happinesses of this world are only reflections of that perennial bliss. But like that great happiness, these little happinesses are born of sattva, or the state of pure serenity. Rajas, the state of excessive activity and unrest, the human state, tamas, and the state of darkness and ignorance, or the brute state, can never give happiness. Whenever happiness comes, it means that a little of the ultimate bliss is reflected in the mirror of the mind. The mind, however, must be pure. Otherwise, there can be no reflection. An impure mind can never be happy. When the mind is pure, that is, when it is free from all sorts of debasing desires, then alone is it fit to think of God. Man can realize God only when sattva predominates in him. Sattva, of course, is the revealing power of nature. The three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, he just briefly described up here. Sattva is a state of serene purity. It's the revealing power within Maya. So it's the most, it makes the idea that Brahman is behind the world the most revealed. If he is able to persist for some time in the state of sattva, then he begins to gain a clear picture of divinity. The sense plane is the sense of tamas. The intellectual plane is the plane of rajas. But God is beyond these two planes. He has no form, therefore he cannot be touched. He cannot be heard or smelled. He is also beyond the reach of our intellectual faculties. Only when a man can go beyond all these ordinary perceptions of the senses and the intellect can he realize what God is. And only he who lives beyond all touches, tastes, forms, who is absolutely pure, from whom the last taint of impurity has been washed off, can become truly one with him. Until we attain the state of sattva, or balance, we cannot worship God truly. And if we wish to get rid of fears and make ourselves perfectly free and happy, there is only one way. We shall have to worship the Lord of the universe. He alone is pure. He alone is free and blissful. Those who wish to free themselves from the bondage of the material world do not care to worship the minor aspect of a deity who give only what is to be had in the universe. True seekers after freedom are not concerned to have their desires satisfied. They want to go straight to the Supreme, or to the incarnations, who are the direct manifestations of the Supreme. So again, the state of sattva is when we can make our mind as pure as possible, clean the mirror of the mind as clean as possible, and let God that is behind the universe be revealed to us, so that we can see that everything is literally made of the consciousness of Brahman. If, however, a man believes in a perfect, all-good God, how can he believe that an evil universe can come from out of such a God? All that is prepared out of sugar must be sweet, so all that comes out of God must be good. Hence, these great souls never find fault with the universe, because to find fault with the universe is to find fault with God. However, men may revile or persecute them. They do not care. Always they worship God and care for nothing else. Well, that's quite a high state, to be able to see everything in the universe as good. Most of us have to settle for the idea that both good and bad come out of the pot when you reach the state of duality. If you're not in the state of unity, then you're in a state of duality, and you're going to have to have a manifest universe that has both good and evil in it. But he's recommending here that we try to see that everything is ultimately from God and therefore good in its true essence. There were 3 Alvar saints in southern India. Each wished to pay respect to the other, because great devotees are always glad to bow at the feet of other devotees. The same thought came to them all, and each set out to find the other. They were overtaken by a terrible storm and had not even a piece of cloth to protect them. One found a little hut where there was just room to lie down. He was very jaded by the long journey on foot, and so as soon as he went in, he stretched himself out to rest. The second Alvar, however, also came that way and saw the hut. He looked in, and finding a man there already, he inquired whether there was room for him. Although the first Alvar was very tired, he replied, "Where one can lie down, 2 can sit." And he sat up to make space for the newcomer. But soon the third Alvar appeared at the opening of the hut and asked the same question. The others 2, rising quickly, answered, "Where 2 can sit, 3 can stand." So they stood huddled together in the narrow shelter, and because they were all so happy and free from selfish concern, so indifferent to poverty and hardship, that God appeared to them. A bright light shone forth from each face, and by that each recognized the other. Joyous shouts of praise broke from their lips, and a wonderful hymn was composed, which is preserved in India to this day. So that's a wonderful tale of unselfishness. I could think of a couple of other parables of Sri Ramakrishna where the little birds each sacrificed themselves to feed the hungry travelers that had taken refuge under their tree, and then the mongoose rolls on the ground and gets half of his coat golden because of their great sacrifice, and is constantly looking for some other person who has been that unselfish, and so forth. So there's several tales like that where unselfishness is highly praised. It was the sattvika condition of these holy men which made it possible for them to perceive the divine presence. They showed what state a man must be in to see God. He must never complain. He must see the good in everything. He must be an optimist and never find fault with God's universe. Those who wish to get rid of all miseries and attain freedom must worship God with a contented heart, devoid of all fault-finding. They who worship the minor aspect of deity in order to have their desires satisfied will always stay in the universe. They may go to heaven for many years, but then they will have to come down again. They are like the bull tied to the oil press. They must go round and around as if bound on a wheel. But they who worship the Supreme, not to gain anything, but only because they love Him, the Supreme, they go beyond the universe and reach that place from which they never have to come back. And of course, that illusion is where you have an animal tied to a press or a grinding stone that you want turned, and so you dangle a piece of tantalizing food in front of them, and it goes around in front of them, and they can never catch it, but they keep trying to get it, and they just go around and around and around. And he's making the analogy that the pleasures of the world are very much like that. We keep going after them. They're kind of dangled in front of us, and we think we're going to catch them. And even if we've temporarily caught them, they seem to elude us. They don't really satisfy us. And so he's drawing that analogy here. And of course, he's referring also to the worship of minor deities, which of course was how a lot of religious practices started. If you again look at the history of world religions and indigenous religions, you find that's primarily the way things got started, worshiping the powers of nature, worshiping the sun, worshiping the moon, worshiping the rain and the thunder and the wind and so forth, all of these powers that needed propitiating just to stay alive. So in order to stay alive, all of these minor deities were worshipped. And so that was perhaps just the way it had to be way back then. But we have those aspects of power in nature. We know what we can control and what we can't control, and so we can just live with it. We don't have to propitiate minor deities just to satisfy our desires. We can focus on the ultimate reality, Brahman, or an avatar that represents Brahman, or one of the main deities that represents Brahman. And by focusing our attention on those, we can reach the goal, because they're not focused on just getting worldly desires satisfied for the day or the week or the month or the year. All right, and you cannot love God and mammon at the same time. You cannot worship both at the same time. If you worship the gods or minor aspects of deity, you cannot realize the Supreme Lord. In order to realize God, You must worship him with the whole heart, and the man who has realized God is perfectly happy. Even if he should go to hell, he would be in heaven, for he lives in God, and where God is, that is heaven. He carries God with him wherever he goes, so he has heaven everywhere. Saints and sages make holy places holy because they carry holiness with them in their heart. Such men live in their own heavens. And of course, many of us also live in the makings of our mind, so our minds can make our living situation either a heaven or a hell, depending on how we interpret things and how we see things. If we can take difficulties and problems as ways of growing and learning and moving forward and developing strength and so forth, then we can modify the pain that usually goes along with a lot of things in life. And then when the good things come, we can remember that all of those things came from God, and we're very thankful to God for giving us all of these things. So we should be very aware that a lot of our mental state determines our outlook on life, like the old saying of looking through rose-colored glasses and everything will look rosy. And so we need to look through God-colored glasses so that we can cover everything with God. That was, I forget which direct disciple said that, but smear God on everything. He said, just cover everything with God to make your life really blissful. And that can also help you make everything a worship. If you see God in the things you're working with, then you're worshiping God by, say, cleaning the house or tending the garden or preparing the meal or whatever it is you're doing. If you can see God in that particular activity or in the things you're using, then the things you're taking care of, then you can basically smear God over all of those things. If you find yourself fortunate enough to be quite well off, then just keep the mindset that the divine has given you the opportunity to take care of these lovely things. And so as long as you have them, you will try to take good care of them and honor them as like a temporary show in a museum. You know, museums get rotating shows, you know, and they allowed to bring in all sorts of beautiful artifacts and paintings and statues and so forth and have them on display, and the museum takes care of them. But the people in the museum don't own those things. They're just taking care of them. So likewise, whatever we are lucky enough to have in this life, we can take care of them. We're the caretakers of them temporarily. And if they should disappear, then, well, we did the best we could taking care of them, and now they're not here. And that has to be the attitude when we are faced with disasters, which of course many people were faced with in Los Angeles. Thousands of people lost their homes or their jobs or their businesses. And you can either moan about it forever or think, well, all right, that phase is gone, and now a new phase will have to start. And it sounds easy when someone like me says it, but when you're faced with it, it can be very difficult. But really, that's the only way you can manage it. Because if you simply get so depressed about your situation, you won't be able to move forward. You have to be able to lift your mind up out of the tragedy into some new aspect so that you can move forward and build a new life from there. And gives you an opportunity to be more reliant and trusting of God. Because if you've lost your home or your possessions or your job, then who else are you going to depend on? You're going to have to depend on the Lord. So these are all things that we have to keep in mind, whether you live in a flood-prone area or a fire-prone area or an earthquake-prone area or any of these other natural things which can cause havoc with our routine life. We have to keep in mind that the Divine Mother or God, or however you like to picture that power beyond, is calling the shots, and she dishes out the lessons, and she dishes out the treats and the punishments and the rewards and the pleasures and the pains, all for our own good. And we have to somehow find the answer in all of that for ourselves. So we'll end just a few minutes early. We have a very busy weekend here. And so our next topic will be union with God. And again, I'll remind you that on Sunday, we'll have the puja for Swami Brahmananda, and you're all welcome to attend. The puja will be in the morning from about 10 to 12:30. Then there's a nice homa fire, and you can, it's a good opportunity to offer up all your actions, anything you've done, thought, or said. You can offer it to the fire of Brahman and help to relieve yourself of all of those karmic ties and burdens. And then an opportunity to offer a flower and some prasad. Then, since Swami Brahmananda initiated the singing of Ram Nam in our order, that we will do our Ram Nam on the puja day rather than on a Saturday this month. So you can enjoy the Ram Nam singing at, I think it's 4 in the afternoon. I forget, 3:30 or 4. It starts in the afternoon, maybe 3:30. I think they changed it. And then he has also served tea, and then we will serve you tea. So you can enjoy the whole Sunday day, and then, of course, a very special arati in the evening. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om peace, peace, peace. Nice to see you all.